The diner smelled of burnt coffee and old grease, a scent that clung to the air like a stubborn memory. The morning rush was a symphony of chaos. The hiss of the grill, the clatter of plates, the low buzz of a dozen conversations at once. And in the middle of it all was Denise Carter. She was hard to miss, not because she made a scene, but because she worked like three people. Her hair was tied back, her apron already stained. She carried steaming mugs in her good hand while balancing plates against her hip. Her other hand, her left, was wrapped in thick bandages that stretched to her wrist. Anyone watching closely could see the stiffness in her movements, the quick flinch of pain she tried to hide. But Denise smiled anyway. That was her shield. Behind the counter, her manager, Ross, leaned against the register, smirking as he barked orders. "Pick it up, Denise. You think this is a charity?" His voice cut through the diner like a knife. At a corner booth, a man sat alone, stirring his coffee. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, with neatly trimmed white hair and boots that had seen more road than city sidewalks. To most, he was just another retiree passing the time. Nobody knew that Harold Whitman owned the diner. He believed you saw the truth when people thought no one important was looking. And for weeks, he had been looking at Ross. Harold had seen the pattern. He'd seen the other waitresses slack off, but Ross never said a word to them, only to Denise. It wasn't just criticism, it was targeted. When Denise asked for help carrying a heavy dishes, Ross didn't even glance at her. Instead, he muttered, "Use both hands. Oh, wait, you can't." His chuckle was a vile, ugly sound. By the end of her shift, Denise's body was trembling from exhaustion. She leaned against the back counter, whispering a quiet prayer no one could hear. She didn't know it yet, but someone had been watching her every move, and that quiet gaze was about to change everything. The next day, Harold returned to the diner. Same corner booth, same black coffee. But his eyes weren't on the menu. They were on Ross. He watched as Ross strutted from table to table, cracking jokes, his laughter louder than anyone else's. But the moment Denise walked by, his face hardened. Every move she made, he pounced. If she poured coffee too slowly, he snapped his fingers. When she dropped a single fork, he shook his head dramatically, telling a nearby table, "See what I have to deal with? Always careless." Harold's suspicion had now turned into a cold certainty. Ross was setting her up. That afternoon, Harold slipped into the back office under the pretense of looking for the restroom. The door was unlocked. On the desk was a stack of misconduct forms. Page after page had Denise's name scrawled across the top, each one accusing her of petty mistakes. But Harold had eaten there for months. He'd never once seen her act out of line. He flipped further and found something worse. Cash register tallies that didn't add up. Every week, the numbers dipped, but no reports had been filed. His stomach sank. Ross wasn't just cruel, he was a thief. That night, Harold stayed long after the diner emptied. As the last customers left, Ross retreated to his office. The door didn't close all the way, and his voice drifted out, bragging to a friend on the phone. "Another $5,000, easy," Ross laughed. "And when they notice the cash is missing, that little waitress takes the fall. She's already got the most write-ups. Nobody's going to believe her over me." A pause. What if she talks? She won't. Not with that hand. I broke it good enough to remind her who's in charge. Harold froze in the shadows, his fists curling so tight his knuckles went white. This wasn't just theft. It was assault. He thought of Denise, smiling through the pain, and something inside him twisted. The truth was out. And tomorrow, the mask was coming off.
The morning rush returned like clockwork. Denise moved between tables, her wrapped hand stiff against her apron. To most, she looked like just another tired worker pushing through the pain. To Harold, she looked like a soldier. But today wasn't going to be just another day. Harold entered quietly. Same boots, same denim jacket, but this time his shoulders were squared differently. He wasn't there as a customer. He was there as the owner. Ross was by the counter, laughing too loudly. The second he saw Harold, his grin faltered. "You again? Back for the eggs?" Harold didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the middle of the diner and tapped his spoon gently against his coffee cup. The soft, metallic ring drew curious looks. Conversations quieted. Denise froze mid-step, her eyes darting toward him. "Morning, everyone," Harold began, his voice calm but firm. "I think it's time you all knew who I really am." Ross chuckled nervously. "What, you writing a book or something?" Harold's gaze locked on him. "No," he said, his voice dropping. "I own this diner." The room went dead silent. A fork clattered onto a plate. Denise's eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. Ross barked out a laugh, though his face had drained pale. You're joking!" Harold pulled a folder from under his jacket and placed it on the counter. Pages spilled out. Misconduct reports, financial sheets, register logs. "I've watched long enough, Ross. I know what you've been doing. Every false report you filed against Denise, every dollar you skimmed from the register." Harold's voice grew colder. "And I know what you did to her hand." Gasps rippled through the diner. Ross stammered, This is ridiculous. You can't prove—" Before he could finish, two uniformed officers walked through the door. Harold had called them that morning. Ross's bravado shattered. "Wait! You can't—" But the cuffs snapped around his wrists before he could finish. As Ross was let out, his protests drowned beneath the clink of chains. Harold turned to Denise. She stood frozen, her good hand pressed against her chest. "You've carried this place on your back. From today forward, you're not just a waitress. You're the new floor supervisor." Denise blinked, tears pooling in her eyes. Customers clapped, some quietly, some loud enough to echo. And for the first time in years, Denise straightened her shoulders, not as the woman people pitied, but as someone, finally, truly seen.
The weeks that followed were a blur of healing, both for Denise's hand and for her spirit. The story of the undercover owner and the corrupt manager became a local legend. The diner, once just a place for a cheap meal, transformed into something more, a symbol of a community that looked out for its own. Customers came in not just for the coffee, but to see Denise, to offer a kind word, to leave a generous tip. They didn't see a victim anymore. They saw a survivor. Harold, true to his word, didn't just make her a supervisor. He became her mentor. He saw the sharp, intelligent mind that had been hidden behind a shield of weary smiles. He taught her about inventory, about managing staff, about the 1,000 tiny details that make a small business thrive. He paid for the best medical care for her hand, ensuring it healed properly, and even helped her find a small, safe apartment closer to work for her and her son. One afternoon, months after Ross had been led away in handcuffs, Denise was training a new waitress, her voice patient and kind. Harold sat in his usual corner booth, watching. He saw her correct a mistake, not with a sneer, but with a gentle, guiding hand. He saw her laugh with a customer, a real unburdened laugh that reached her eyes. He saw a woman who was no longer just surviving, but flourishing. After the lunch rush, she brought him a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. "You know," she said, her voice quiet, "I used to pray every day for things to get better. I just never thought the answer to my prayers would be an old veteran in a corner booth." Harold smiled, a genuine, warm expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He said, "I wasn't the answer, Denise. I was just the one who was lucky enough to be watching when you saved yourself." She looked down at her hand, now free of bandages, a faint scar, the only reminder of the pain she had endured. For so long, it had been a symbol of her weakness, of her inability to escape. Now, she realized, it was a testament to her strength. It was the mark of a woman who had refused to be broken. The diner still smelled of burnt coffee and old grease, but to Denise, it now smelled like something else entirely. It smelled like a second chance. It smelled like home.